Welcome to this particular lecture on microbial hormone. In this particular lecture, I shall be discussing the different aspects of hormone produced by a unicellular animal belonging to the group Protozoa, and I shall also discuss how these protozoa help in the development of a unique association in agriculture, and also I will conclude by saying the hormonal development in Cnidaria in the animal Hydra. So to start with, protozoa is a group of unicellular organism and they belong to a group which is Protista because they are unicellular eukaryote. And this unicellular animal carries out the entire metabolic activity within a single cell. So that single cell is responsible for all types of activity like digestion, absorption, assimilation, also excretion and also circulation. It also obviously helps in reproduction. So this particular hormone produced by protozoa can be either growth hormone. I will start with the different hormones which are helping in the growth and development of protozoa. And then I will follow it up by saying the different hormones which is produced by protozoa for helping them to survive as a pathogen or increasing their pathogenicity and also suppressing the activity of defense reaction in the human or animal host. Then I shall be stating the different role of protozoa in the rhizosphere or in the root atmosphere of a plant, helping in agricultural development. And finally, I will get into the hormone produced by Hydra. So, a particular protozoa which is Dictyostelium. This Dictyostelium commonly will be growing actually on the surface of the soil or in the subsurface of the soil, which is feeding on amoeba. So, when it is feeding on amoeba, at a time will come that amoeba concentration in the soil will reduce. So this particular Dictyostelium now will be starving, and when they are starving, they send across a message, a chemical signaling, and this is in the form of cyclic adenosine monophosphate or CAMP waves. And because of these CAMP waves, they communicate. They understand that now food is very much scarce in the environment, so they come close to each other and they will aggregate. And this aggregation will bring about a unique mound, and this mound will develop into a tip, and this tip ultimately will help in the formation of an aggregated slug, and this slug gradually will migrate. How will it migrate? It will migrate with the development of unique pseudopodia formation, and this pseudopodia actually is stimulated by the muscle protein filaments or actin filaments, and they will develop into a particular large aggregate, and they will move from surface which is having less food to a surface which is having more food. And as they get into a surface where there is more food, now they reproduce. So they develop into a particular fruit body, and they develop into a sporangia, and they liberate out the spores. And these spores will come out and again will start feeding on the amoeba available in the surface. So in one way we can understand that this particular growth hormone is helping in the development or aggregation of the Dictyostelium cells and also help them to survive in difficult environmental condition. Coming to a very important single cell protozoa, which is Paramecium. Paramecium is having a unique slipper-shaped structure, having a macro and the micro nucleus, which is controlling the vegetative character and the sex character. It is also having a contractile vacuole, which is ultimately helping in osmoregulation. But the most important thing is they are having the ciliated projection, and these cilia, they are helping in locomotion, and also they help in gathering of food. That means through this gullet, when they are taking the food, they are actually creating a vortex because of the circular movement of these cilia, and the food will get inside the cell and will be digested inside. But this particular Paramecium is having a unique structure called trichocyst, And this trichocyst is actually a particular protein structure which is produced from proprotein. And this is produced inside the cell, it is deposited and it comes out. And this trichocyst development is because of a unique protein chemical, I should not say hormone, but this is commonly called the trichocyst matrix protein. So the deposition of the trichocyst matrix protein will allow the development of the trichocyst, and once the development of the trichocyst is completed, they will give out chemical signal. So this is how they develop, and as they develop, they will give out the signal, and this signal will allow the aggregation of this particular paramecium cell, and thereby they help in reproduction. So in one way, we say that the growth and reproduction is being controlled by this unique chemical hormone in paramecium. Now coming to the different parasitic protozoa. In parasitic protozoa, the most important thing is entamoeba. Entamoeba is commonly entering our digestive system or alimentary canal through contaminated water. And it is commonly, it is in the form of matured cyst, and this cyst will germinate to produce tropozoites. And these tropozoites will produce some unique pseudopodia, and they move along the alimentary canal from stomach to the intestine. And when in the intestine, they will again produce the cyst, and this cyst will again come out with the fecal matter and will again re-inhabit another particular human host, and thereby they will spread from one host to other. But this entamoeba, as I was telling, is having two stages. This is the actual photograph of the entamoeba cyst having the multiple nuclei, and this is the actively moving tropozoid with the help of pseudopodium, and this is how they are feeding on different human cells, including the RBC or the erythrocyte. But the most important thing in a life of entamoeba is the adherence to a particular host cell, and this is the intestinal cell. So the intestinal epithelial cell will have a specific receptor having galactose. So this galactose receptor is being recognized by a particular hormone-like compound which is lectin. And in this case, because it is produced by Entamoeba histolytica, so it is called EH lectin. So the EH lectin will recognize the particular galactose enriched receptor, and often this particular lectin is also called GIAP or galactoside initiable adherence protein. And once this particular receptor is recognized, it will gradually adhere and get inside the cell. And as it gets inside the cell, it will start feeding on the cell, and it will erode the cell, and it will initiate the production of different cytokine or natural killer cell, as a result of which the interleukins will be produced. So in one way, the hypersensitivity will be initiated. And there may be sometimes the body will not actually submit easily. They will also produce the neutrophil, and the neutrophil will try to engulf the protozoa, but sometimes it is in vain. So this particular protozoa will now get inside the blood vessel, and as a result of which they will feed on the blood vessel, they feed on the blood cell, they damage the cell, and they reduce the particular lining of the intestine and will produce different toxin which will allow the spreading of the disease. So what we have seen is recognition and spreading is brought about by some chemical signal, hormone-like signal by this entamoeba. Now coming to, this is the EH lectin structure, which is a dimer. It is formed of two specific heavy chain protein, that is the 170 and the 35 Kd protein joined by disulfide linkage, and this particular heavy chain is actually conserved. Why it is conserved? Because this particular heavy chain is binding with the particular galactose enriched residue of the host intestine. So very often we can target a particular drug which is on the light chain, and thereby we can check this particular entamoeba infection. Coming to another very interesting aspect, which is the production of different constituent present in the entamoeba. Now this constituent, there may be some entamoeba which will be dying, and as they die, they will undergo lysis, which is a common phenomenon. and the lysis of entamoeba will produce some protein molecules, and these protein signals will ultimately help in the modification of the ionic transport inside the intestine. There may be more calcium entry, there will be reduced sodium and chloride entry, as a result of which this ionic imbalance will occur, and this ionic imbalance will ultimately switch on the production of certain particular hormone, which is serotonin and prostaglandin to a lesser extent. And at the same time, there may be the production of neurotensin. So this is the serotonin and neurotensin production initiated by entamoeba infection. But if by any means this particular serotonin production can be inhibited by a compound like this bufotenine, then what happens is the entamoeba infection can be checked. So in one way we can say that serotonin regulation may regulate the development of entamoeba inside human intestine. Coming to another very important pathogenic hormone, which is the adiponectin. Now adiponectin is actually a particular fat derived hormone as seen in this particular figure, and it is produced by a series of human cells. It may be produced by the endothelium, it may be produced by the adipocytes, that's why the name adiponectin. It may be produced by the skeletal muscle, and it is being recognized by a particular receptor, which is adipore-2 receptor or adipore-1 receptor. So adipore-2 and adipore-1 receptor, once it is recognized, they will ultimately reduce the glucose production and they will induce the hypersensitivity by AMPK or AMP kinase enzyme activity, as a result of which there will be inflammation associated with different protozoan infection. That may include the Plasmodium, which is the common malaria causing organism. Coming to the next important group of hormone which is induced in female due to protozoan infection. Now it has been observed that in particular a pregnant woman, there are different sex hormones, the sex steroids in the form of progesterone, in the form of estrogen, which are active. And this particular activity of the female sex hormone will allow the development of different protozoa like the tropozoites of Toxoplasma gondii, like that of the Leishmania causing the dreadful disease of Kala-Azar, or like that of the Plasmodium falciparum, which is inducing the cerebral malaria. So it is very obvious that because of the elevation of the level of sex steroid, the corticosterone and the aldosterone, a female, pregnant female is more prone to protozoan infection, including malaria. Now coming to another group of particular hormonal change inducing prevention of protozoan disease. Now this is actually a hormone called leptin. It is recognized by a specific receptor, the LEP-RB receptor in the intestine. Now this leptin is actually a natural hormone where the production of leptin might increase in case of infection by entamoeba. So whenever there is entamoeba histolytica, there will be more leptin production, and as there is more leptin production, there will be less sugar orientation, as a result of which the entamoeba may be checked. But what happens in a third world country like in India, like in Africa, what happens is the nutritional deficiency is there, as a result of which leptin production is reduced. As the leptin production is reduced, this pathway is inhibited. And what is this pathway? The JAK2 and the STAT3 and 5 activation. Because of the JAK-STAT activity, there will be accumulation of mucus or mucin produced by the goblet cell. So there will be more production of mucus, which will ultimately prevent the adherence of this particular entamoeba by EH-lectin, as discussed earlier. So what happens is, those persons who are nutritionally sound, they will show more control or more check of entamoeba infection, but those who are having poor nutrition will show more entamoeba infection. And this is, of course, as I was telling, is called IEC mediated or intestinal epithelial cell mediated signaling system in case of entamoeba infection. Now coming to a very important hormone which is not produced by protozoa, but it is produced by animals including human, and it is commonly called the erythropoietin. This is the erythropoietin binding to specific receptor in red, and this is the 166 amino acid residue of erythropoietin represented by the ribbons. So this erythropoietin commonly is produced by the kidney, and they are having enormous activity all over. They are stimulating the erythropoiesis in the red bone marrow. They are having cardioprotection. They are having angiogenesis. They are helping in wound healing. They are helping in the protection of the retina. They are also helping in renal protection, and they are also helping in activity of the neural function. So we can say that EPO or erythropoietin is a very important hormone which is ultimately helping, in this case, protection from dreadful disease of cerebral malaria caused by Plasmodium falciparum, particularly in countries like India and Africa, where this cerebral malaria is more common. Why it is? Because it will help in the formation of new blood vessels. Now, when the cerebral malaria is invading, they will try to block the blood vessels. They will clot the blood vessels, as a result of which the disease colony or the disease spread will be more in a particular area. The moment the EPO concentration is high, there will be more angiogenesis, and they tend to flow away the cells, as a result of which the disease development will be reduced. And at the same time, as I was telling, it is having cerebral protection, so cerebral malaria damage to the brain will be reduced by increased erythropoietin concentration. Now we will come to the role of different protozoa in agricultural microbiology. Actually, in agriculture, what we have seen is very commonly we grow different VAM or vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. We grow different nitrogen fixing bacteria for the supplementation of the nutrients. But a very important thing is there, which was denoted by Klarholm in 1985, which is called the microbial loop. What is happening is, whenever the plant wants some friendly bacteria to grow nearby, they will produce some exudation which will allow the accumulation of bacteria. So there may be different protozoa which will come and feed on this bacteria, and thereby they will produce more ammonia, and this ammonia will ultimately allow the production of more IAA by the rhizosphere bacteria. So in one way, IAA production increases, and because of this IAA and nitrate concentration, there will be more lateral root growing, as a result of which the plant will be benefited. This benefit doesn't only come from the bacteria, this benefit comes from the fact that because of the unique association between the bacteria and the protozoa. And this is how actually it is clearly seen how the protozoa is taking in the bacteria inside the vacuole. So this is how the protozoa is feeding on the bacteria and liberating more nitrate for the plant. But the story is not so simple. There may be different types of organisms present in the rhizosphere, which will include the bacteria, which will include the fungi, which will include the different insects or different annelids like earthworm, which will include the other microfauna in the form of protozoa, in the form of hydra. So what happens is, there are three distinct features which is happening. One is the release of amino group from the consumed rhizosphere bacteria, which is, as I have explained already, which is commonly called the microbial loop. There will be more phytohormone released, and this phytohormone can be from the fungi as well, because fungi and bacteria both are being fed by the microfauna. And at the same time, there will be grazing mediated changes. That is, the fauna can directly feed on the particular plant part or the plant portion which has been eliminated because of bacterial infection. As a result of which the rhizosphere become more productive, as a result of which there will be more nutrient recycling, as a result of which there will be more agricultural productivity. And depending upon the availability of food, we can clearly see that there are distinct areas, the green area, the orange area, the white area, they are being inhabited by different microfauna. So microfauna inside a particular rhizosphere actually is characterized on the basis of the unique niche or the nourishment which they get from that particular area. And sometimes, as I was telling, that there may be colonization, like here it is in clover root, we have the Heterodera colonization, and because of this colonization there will be increase in the nourishment or increase in the flow of assimilation or photoassimilation in this particular plant. So in one way what we say is that because of this colonization of Heterodera, there will be more nourishment cycling, and because of that there will be more photosynthetic activity and productivity in clover plant. Now this is a unique photograph which shows that there are different insects or different insect larvae which is feeding on the particular plant root. Of course we can see these larvae, but we don't see the protozoa. So protozoa can also feed on plant root because they derive nourishment from there. And as they feed on, they will also release that particular nutrient into the soil, and these nutrients are re-available to the plant and it can go up to the plant leaf. So what does it mean? It means a limited herbivory will allow in recycling of nutrients between the root and the leaf of the plant. So this is a very important phenomena. A plant actually cannot take up the nourishment directly which is present on the surface of the root, but it is being held by the protozoa and other insect larvae. They are feeding on those nutrients, they are releasing into the rhizosphere, making the root absorb them, and thereby they help in auto-recycling. So the phenomenon of auto-recycling wouldn't have been possible in the plant life without the unique activity of the protozoa and the insect larvae. We come to a very important aspect, which is the growth of insect larvae. This is commonly, we will feature it in this way, interaction between the protozoa and the insect. Now commonly a insect growth from its larval stage is very important. It is being controlled by a hormone called juvenile hormone, and sometimes it is being correlated with another hormone called ecdysone. So this juvenile hormone is a derivative of farnesyl diphosphate, which is producing farnesol, and ultimately it will produce methyl farnesoate, and on other side the farnesoic acid will also liberate the juvenile hormone. And this juvenile hormone is helping in the growth and development of the larva from one stage to the next stage, then to the third stage, and this is commonly called the molting. And ultimately the larval change is actually brought about by the formation of a unique pupa, and there will be the formation of the imago. So this juvenile hormone production is a very important change in the life cycle of an insect. But naturally, this juvenile hormone is released outside. It may be released outside in the soil, and it may have some negative effect on other protozoa. So here I will be discussing what is the impact of this juvenile hormone on other protozoa, and here it is seen that this is the Crithridia cell, which is a flagellated protozoa which is inhibited by the juvenile hormone, because they have a unique receptor which is a hot dog like structure which is called JH binding or juvenile hormone binding protein. Because of the presence of this protein, this protozoa can actually come across this particular juvenile hormone, and thereby they will be checked or their growth is checked. Now coming to the last part of this lecture, this is actually the hydra or a unique cnidaria, where they are showing this particular life cycle. Actually, to be more specific, it is more pronounced in another particular cnidarian animal called Obelia. So we can say this is the life cycle of Obelia. What we see is in this particular life cycle of Obelia or hydra in the broader sense, there are a unique polyp represented by this tube and the medusa. And the medusa actually will be given out through a specific structure, and this structure of medusae will undergo gametogenesis, will produce the zygote again, and that will produce the polyp again. So what is important in the life cycle of this particular cnidarian animal is that the growth and development of this particular polyp. It has been observed that the polyp is growing by rapid cell division. So first of all, a very important compound which is the 5-bromo-2-deoxyuridine or BRDU, which is replacing the thiamine. Now BRDU is labeled, radioactively labeled, and we see that this BRDU level is increasing. By autoradiography, what we see is the level of BRDO containing cell increases. And thereby we can see that this particular development is because of a unique growth hormone present in this animal Hydra or Obelia, where there are three types of cell in the form of nematocysts, in the form of ciliated cells, and in the form of neuron. So this cellular development and cell differentiation is brought about by the growth hormone. Initially, by the development, the polyp is completed, and after the polyp has attained certain height, there will be development of other cells or other organs, and thereby the animal is completed by this growth hormone. Now naturally, Hydra can be of different species. Like here, the Oligoactis is one species which is represented by this small Hydra, and the other one is the Hydra magni papillata, which is a taller one. So what we can see is that particular Hydra, because of its cell differentiation, will show modification in structure. And this structure of the first one, that is Oligoactis, is a small polyp with tentacles. And that means what? This is having early maturation or the development of the nidoblast cell or the nematocyst. And the second case, or in the last case here, the stalk is very long and the tentacles are smaller. And this is all brought about by the growth hormone present in Hydra. And in the first case, this green color is due to the algal colony. So we can say that the algal colony is producing some inhibitory, growth inhibiting hormone or growth inhibiting chemical, which is preventing the growth of the polyp. So thereby, by the regulation of hormone which is controlling the growth and differentiation in Hydra, we can have the speciation in Hydra or the emergence of new species in Hydra. And that is very important in cell differentiation, where there will be synchronous and asynchronous growth of the tentacles. So in this particular lecture, what we have learnt is, we have learnt about the different hormones which is produced by protozoa, which is helping in their growth and development. At the same time, how they are helping them to survive as a successful pathogen. We have also discussed how the hormonal level changes in human and other animal hosts because of protozoan infection, inducing inhibition or inducing resistance. And we have also learnt about the interaction of the microfauna, including protozoa, with bacteria and fungi, how they are helping in the growth of plant, that is in agricultural productivity. And finally, we have learned the role of growth hormones in Hydra and other cnidarian animal, which is actually helping in differentiation and speciation in Hydra.